A stack of overdue invoices sat on the pharmacy counter, their red final notice stamps glaring under the harsh overhead lights. I shoved them into my bag before anyone could see, my fingers trembling slightly. It was 10:55 p.m., 5 minutes until freedom, or at least the version of it I could afford. The automatic doors hissed open, letting in a blast of damp, frigid air and the distant wail of a siren. New York never really slept, but tonight it seemed particularly restless. I finished tallying the register, the rhythmic beep of the scanner the only sound in the empty store. My coworker, Sarah, had already bolted, leaving me to close up alone. Again, I didn't mind the solitude usually, but tonight the silence felt heavy, pressing against my temples like a physical weight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another notification from the hospital billing department. I ignored it. There was nothing new I could tell them. No magic pile of money I'd discovered since their last call 3 hours ago. Once the gates were down and the alarm set, I stepped out into the deluge. The rain wasn't just falling. It was attacking the pavement, bouncing off the concrete in angry little splashes. I pulled my hood up, but it was a futile gesture against the wind whipping down the avenue. My destination wasn't home. Not yet. My apartment was a cold, empty box that smelled of stale air and anxiety. I needed 5 minutes of neutrality. Just 5 minutes where I wasn't Lauren Mitchell, daughter of a dying man, sister to a worried student, and debtor to half the medical establishment of the East Coast. The 24-hour cafe next door was a beacon of yellow warmth in the gray storm. The bell jingled as I pushed inside, shaking off water like a wet dog. The place was nearly deserted, save for a few scattered patrons nursing late-night insomnias. I made a beeline for my usual spot, a booth tucked away in the back corner, near the radiator that clanked and hissed but threw off glorious heat. I slid into the cracked vinyl seat, sighing as the warmth began to seep into my damp jeans. A waitress I didn't recognize dropped a menu on the table without stopping. I didn't need it. I just needed caffeine and a moment to breathe. I pulled out my phone, checking the time. 11:10 p.m. If I hurried, I could catch the express train and be home before midnight. Maybe I'd even sleep tonight. The thought was laughable, but I entertained it anyway. Then, he walked in. Or rather, he stormed in, bringing the weather with him. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a dark suit that was soaked through, the fabric clinging to him in a way that should have looked disheveled, but somehow only made him look dangerous. He didn't pause at the entrance, didn't wait to be seated. He scanned the room with a sharp, predatory gaze before marching directly toward my corner. I assumed he was heading for the table behind me. I looked back down at my phone, composing a text to Megan to check if she'd finished her essay. A shadow fell over my screen. I looked up to find the man standing right there, staring at the empty seat opposite me. Without a word, he sat down. I blinked, stunned into momentary silence. He pulled a phone from his pocket, sleek, black, expensive, and dialed a number, pressing it to his ear while staring out the window, completely ignoring my existence. Rain dripped from his dark hair onto the table. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice sounding thin to my own ears. He didn't even twitch. "Sì, ho capito. No, stasera no," he murmured into the phone, his voice a low rumble of Italian. "Excuse me," I said again, louder this time. "This booth is taken." He finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, almost black in the dim light, and they held absolutely zero interest. He flicked his fingers in a dismissive shooing motion, then turned his shoulder to me, continuing his conversation. The audacity was breathtaking. It wasn't just rude. It was a dismissal so complete it felt like a slap. My long day, the unpaid bills, the worry about Dad, the exhaustion deep in my bones, it all coalesced into a sudden, sharp point of fury. Who did this guy think he was? Some Wall Street jerk who thought the world was his personal waiting room? I snapped, leaning forward. "This table is occupied. There are 10 other empty tables. Move." He paused mid-sentence, pulling the phone away from his ear. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, his gaze sweeping over my pharmacy uniform, my frizzy damp hair, the cheap bag on the seat next to me. A corner of his mouth quirked up, not in a smile, but in something patronizing. "Relax, Tesoro," he said, Sweetheart. His accent thick now that he was speaking English. I just need a dry spot for 5 minutes. Drink your coffee and be quiet. Be quiet. The rage that flared in my chest was white-hot and immediate. It bypassed logic, bypassed fear, bypassed the survival instinct that should have told me not to provoke strange men in empty diners at midnight. My hand moved before my brain caught up. My fingers curled around the paper cup of iced coffee I'd bought earlier and hadn't finished. Mostly melted ice and watered-down caffeine now. I stood up and threw it. The lid popped off mid-air. The brown liquid splashed squarely across his chest, soaking his white shirt, his silk tie, and splattering up onto his jaw. The silence that followed was absolute. The clinking of silverware stopped. The radio seemed to cut out. The man froze, phone still in hand, coffee dripping from his chin. He closed his eyes for a brief second, taking a slow, deep breath. I stood there, chest heaving, realizing exactly what I'd just done. Oh, God. I'd just assaulted a stranger, a large, arrogant stranger. Panic began to claw at the edges of my anger. He opened his eyes. They were terrifyingly calm. He didn't yell. He didn't jump up. He simply reached for the napkin dispenser, pulled out a few flimsy squares, and began to dab at his face. Well, he said softly, inspecting a coffee stain on his cuff. That was direct. The manager, a balding man named Jerry who usually ignored everything short of a fire, came rushing out from the kitchen, pale and sweating. Mr. Verciani, oh my God, sir, I am so sorry, I didn't see you come in. Is everything, did she? I'll call the police right now. Mr. Verciani. The name hit me like a physical blow. Anthony Verciani. I knew that name. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that name, though usually it was whispered. Verciani Holdings. Construction, waste management, consulting. The police had raided his offices twice last year and found nothing. The papers called him a controversial businessman. The streets called him something else entirely. And I had just thrown iced coffee on him. I took a step back, my legs hitting the booth seat. He sat at my table. I stammered, looking at Jerry. He was rude. Jerry looked at me like I was insane. You threw coffee on Mr. Verciani? Lauren, are you out of your mind? Anthony Verciani held up a hand, silencing Jerry instantly. He stood up slowly, unfolding his height until he towered over the table. He was big, not gym muscle big, but solid, imposing. He wiped a droplet from his jaw, his eyes never leaving mine. It's fine, Jerry, he said, his voice smooth, unbothered. The lady is passionate. It's been a long night for everyone. He looked at me, and for a second I thought I saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Not anger, something else. Curiosity, amusement. He reached into his soaked jacket pocket and pulled out a small, cream-colored card. He placed it gently on the table, right in a puddle of spilled coffee. Next time, Miss Mitchell, he said, reading my name tag. Use words. They're cleaner. He turned and walked out. Just like that. No threats, no yelling, no retaliation. He pushed through the doors back into the rain, leaving me standing there shaking, surrounded by the smell of cold coffee and catastrophe. Jerry turned on me, his face red. Get out. Clock out, get your stuff, and get out. You're lucky he didn't wreck the place. Don't come back here, Lauren. I didn't argue. I grabbed my bag and fled. The walk to the subway was a blur of paranoia. Every car that passed seemed to slow down. Every shadow looked like a man in a suit. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely swipe my Metro card. What had I done? I'd just humiliated a mob boss in public. People got disappeared for less than that. I made it to my apartment, locked the 3 deadbolts, and slid down against the door. My heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled the damp business card out of my pocket. It was simple, elegant, just his name and a number. No title. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the street below, waiting for black cars to pull up, for men to kick down my door. Every creak of the old building made me jump. I thought about Dad, lying in his hospital bed, hooked up to machines that cost more per hour than I made in a month. I thought about Megan, studying late in her dorm, thinking her biggest problem was organic chemistry. I had put them all in danger because I couldn't control my temper for 5 minutes. Morning came gray and unapologetic. I had to go back to the pharmacy. I couldn't afford to lose a shift, even if I was terrified. I dressed in a daze, chugged stale coffee, and walked the 6 blocks to work, flinching at every noise. The morning passed in an agonizing crawl. Every time the door chime rang, I froze. But it was just Mrs. Gable needing her blood pressure meds, or kids buying candy before school. By noon, the adrenaline crash was leaving me dizzy. Maybe he'd just forgotten. Maybe I wasn't worth the effort of revenge. Then, at 12:30, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. It idled there, dark tinted windows reflecting the gloomy sky. My stomach dropped to my shoes. This was it. I was stocking the aisle with cold medicine when the door opened. It wasn't Anthony Versiani. It was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. Thick neck, broken nose, wearing a suit that strained at the shoulders. He scanned the store, spotted me, and walked straight over. "Lauren Mitchell?" I gripped a box of Dayquil so hard the cardboard crumpled. "Yes?" He reached into his jacket. I flinched, half expecting a gun. He pulled out a thick white envelope and held it out. "Mr. Versiani asked me to give you this." I stared at it. "What is it?" "Open it." I took it with trembling fingers. It was heavy. I tore the flap open. Inside was a cashier's check. I pulled it out, and the numbers swam before my eyes. $200,000. I gasped, loud and sharp. Paulina, the other pharmacist, looked over from the counter, her eyes widening. Behind the check was a note, written in elegant, sharp handwriting on heavy stationery. "Your father's debt has been purchased and cleared. The experimental treatment at St. Vincent has been approved and paid for in full. Stop worrying. AV." I read it 3 times. The words didn't make sense. My father's debt. The loan sharks Dad had gone to in desperation 3 months ago. The ones whose threats I had been hiding from Megan. The ones I hadn't told anyone about because I was too ashamed, too scared. How did he know? "I don't understand," I whispered, looking up at the granite man. "Why? Why would he do this?" The man's face remained impassive. "He said you needed a break, and he said to keep your phone on." He turned and walked out before I could say another word. I stood there in the aisle, clutching a fortune in my hand, my mind spinning so fast I felt sick. He knew about the debt. He knew about the treatment. He knew everything. That meant he'd been watching. For how long? I rushed to the break room, ignoring Paulina's questions, and dialed the hospital. "This is Lauren Mitchell, Richard Mitchell's daughter. I need to check on his billing status." "1 moment, honey," the admin said, her voice bright. A pause. "Oh, it looks like everything was settled this morning. Account balance is 0. And Dr. Levinson's office called. He's been moved up the list for the trial. He starts Tuesday." I hung up, sliding down the wall until I hit the floor. It was real. It wasn't a trick. My dad was going to get the treatment. The crushing weight that had been sitting on my chest for 6 months was gone. Just like that. But nothing was free, especially not from men like Anthony Versiani. My phone rang in my hand. The screen flashed, "Megan." I answered instantly, panic flaring again. "Lauren?" Megan's voice was high, tight with fear. "Lauren, there are guys outside the library." "What?" I scrambled up. "What guys? Where are you?" "In the parking lot. I was walking to my car. 2 guys, they started following me. I ran back to the entrance, but they're just standing there watching me. They're not campus security. They look scary. Russian, maybe?" I heard them talking. The Russians. The loan sharks. They weren't supposed to know about Megan. I'd kept her out of it. "Stay inside," I ordered, grabbing my bag. "Do not go out. Call campus police." "I did. They said they're sending someone, but it's taking forever." "Lauren, I'm scared." I hung up and stared at the business card I still had in my pocket, the one stained with coffee. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about pride or danger or consequences. I dialed the number. It rang once. "Miss Mitchell." Anthony's voice answered. Calm, dark, knowing. My sister, I choked out. Megan, at Columbia. There are men following her. Russians. I know, he said. Stay on the line. I heard him snapping orders in Italian to someone in the background. Give me 15 minutes, he said to me. Don't leave the pharmacy. You're safe there. But Megan is being handled. Stay put, Lauren. The line went dead. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I paced the small break room, staring at the clock. 1:10, 1:15, 1:20. My phone buzzed. Megan again. Lauren, oh my God, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. These other guys showed up, like 4 of them, in 2 black SUVs. They just walked up to the guys who were watching me. I couldn't hear what they said, but the Russian guys looked terrified. They got in their car and drove off so fast they almost hit a pole. Then one of the new guys came over to me, very polite, showed me ID, said they were private security you hired. I let out a breath that was half sob. Yes, I did. Are you okay? I'm fine. He said he's going to escort me back to my dorm. Lauren, since when can we afford private security? What is going on? I'll explain later. Just go with him. Lock your door. I love you. I hung up and leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the locker. Safe. They were safe. My phone buzzed again. A text from the number I'd just called. Car outside. Come out. I walked out of the pharmacy. The black SUV was there. The back door opened. Anthony Versiani sat inside, wearing a fresh suit, looking as immaculate and unbothered as if I hadn't thrown a drink on him 12 hours ago. He gestured for me to get in. I climbed into the leather interior. It smelled of expensive cologne and leather. The door closed, sealing out the noise of the street. You look better dry, he commented, his eyes sweeping over me. Thank you, I said, my voice steady now. For Megan, and for the check. But I need to know. Why? Why are you doing this? He leaned back, crossing his legs. Why do you think? I don't know. I threw coffee on you. Usually that doesn't earn people $250,000 and a personal guard detail. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. True. Usually it earns them a broken arm. I swallowed hard. I didn't help you because of the coffee, Lauren, he said quietly. I helped you because I've been watching those Russians for 3 months. They're sloppy. They were going to take you to get to your father's insurance payout. When they realized the payout wasn't coming fast enough, they switched targets to your sister. The blood drained from my face. I bought the debt to get them off your back, he continued. But they don't respect paperwork. They only respect force. Which is why your sister now has a detail, and why you are sitting in my car. You've been watching us for 3 months. I watch everything in my territory, especially when foreign elements try to muscle in on vulnerable citizens. So this is charity? I asked, skepticism dripping from my tone. The Mafia does charity work now? His eyes hardened slightly. Call it an investment in neighborhood stability, and don't use that word. Which word? Mafia? Yes, it's outdated. What should I call it then? Versiani Holdings, he said smoothly. Now, we have a problem. The Russians know I bought the debt, but they think I'm soft. They think they can still squeeze you for interest. Until I convince them otherwise, your apartment isn't safe. Neither is your sister's dorm. What are you saying? I'm saying you need a place to stay. Somewhere secure. Until I handle this. Handle it how? Permanently. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was dangerous. Everything about him screamed danger. The way he sat, the way he spoke, the casual way he discussed ending people. But he had saved my dad. He had saved Megan. And right now, looking into his dark eyes, I realized something terrifying. I felt safer in this car with him than I had felt in my own home for months. Where? I asked. I have a place in Manhattan. Secure access. Plenty of room. You and Megan can stay there. Your father is safe at the hospital. I have men on his floor already. I should have said no. I should have opened the door and run. But the image of those men waiting for Megan flashed in my mind. I thought about the check in my pocket. I thought about the way he hadn't flinched when I threw that coffee. Okay, I whispered. He nodded once. Good decision. He tapped the partition glass. Driver, home. As the car pulled away into traffic, I watched the familiar streets of Brooklyn slide by, realizing with a jolt that I was leaving my old life behind. I sat back against the leather seat, glancing at Anthony. He was already back on his phone, speaking low Italian, ignoring me again. But this time, the silence between us didn't feel like a dismissal. It felt like a shield. And God help me. I was grateful for it. The penthouse elevator opened directly into a foyer that was larger than my entire apartment in Brooklyn. Marble floors reflected the recessed lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan that stole the breath from my lungs. It was silent, pristine, and terrifyingly expensive. Anthony walked in ahead of me, tossing his keys onto a console table, with the casual indifference of someone who owned the world. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, loosening his tie. "Megan will be here in an hour. My driver picked her up." I stood awkwardly by the elevator doors, clutching my bag. My life had dissolved and reformed into something unrecognizable in the span of 24 hours. "This is a lot," I managed to say. "It's safe," he corrected, turning to face me. "That's the priority." He led me through the main living area. Sleek Italian furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than my education, a kitchen that looked like a showroom. "Guest suites are down that hall. Pick whichever one you want. The one at the end has the best view of the river." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "Anthony, Mr. Versiani, I don't know how to repay you for this. The check, the security, staying here." He stopped, his expression unreadable. "I told you, Lauren, the debt is handled. You don't owe me anything. Nobody does all this for nothing," I challenged quietly. "Especially not men like you." He tilted his head, studying me. "Men like me? You mean criminals?" "I mean powerful men, businessmen, whatever you want to call yourself." He stepped closer, invading my personal space just enough to make my heart skip a beat. Maybe I just don't like seeing bullies pick on people who can't fight back. Or maybe I admire a woman who has the guts to throw iced coffee at a stranger when she's pushed too far. I felt a flush heat my cheeks. "I really am sorry about that. Don't be." It was refreshing. A genuine smile touched his lips this time, transforming his face from intimidating to devastatingly handsome. "Go. Rest. You look like you haven't slept in a week." I retreated to the guest room he'd mentioned. It was luxurious, decorated in creams and soft grays, with a bed that looked like a cloud. I sat on the edge, staring at my hands. They were still shaking. An hour later, the elevator dinged. I rushed out to see Megan stepping into the foyer, looking wide-eyed and pale, clutching her backpack straps. "Megan!" I ran to her, wrapping her in a crushing hug. She felt fragile in my arms, trembling slightly. "Lauren, oh my God," she whispered into my shoulder. "Those guys. They were really scary. And then the other guys came and... Where are we? Whose house is this?" I pulled back, holding her shoulders. "We're safe. That's what matters. This is a friend's place." "A friend?" She looked around at the opulence. "Since when do you have billionaire friends and private security? It's complicated," I said, steering her toward the living room. "But the debt, Dad's debt, it's gone, paid off." Her jaw dropped. "What? How? Did you win the lottery?" Something like that. Anthony appeared from the hallway, having changed into a dark sweater and jeans. He looked less like a corporate shark and more like just a man, a very intense, very rich man. "You must be Megan," he said, extending a hand. "Anthony Versiani." Megan shook it, looking dazed. "Hi. Are you the one who sent the scary bodyguards?" "I prefer to call them protective detail," he said smoothly. "Are you hungry?" I was about to order food. We ate takeout from a high-end Italian place that Anthony clearly owned, sitting around the kitchen island. The tension slowly bled out of the room as Megan relaxed, charmed by Anthony's easy manner. He asked her about her classes, her major, listening with genuine interest. I watched him, trying to reconcile the ruthless man I'd read about with this person who was making my little sister laugh after the scariest day of her life. Later that night, after Megan had gone to bed, I found Anthony on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself against the wind and joined him. "She's okay," I said softly. "She's sleeping. Thank you." He didn't look at me. "Good. She's a smart kid." "She is." I hesitated. "You said you've been watching us for 3 months. Why didn't you step in sooner?" He turned then, resting his elbows on the railing. "I needed to be sure. About the Russians. About who was pulling their strings. If I moved too early, they might have accelerated their timeline. I had to wait until I had leverage." "And me?" I asked. "Did you investigate me too?" He looked me in the eye. "Thoroughly. I know you work double shifts at the pharmacy and pick up weekends when you can. I know you sold your mother's jewelry to pay for your father's first round of chemo. I know you haven't been on a date in 2 years because you don't have the time or the emotional energy." I felt exposed, stripped bare. That's an invasion of privacy. It's due diligence. I don't bring people into my orbit blindly. Is that what I am now? In your orbit? You're under my protection, Lauren. That means you're my responsibility. For how long? Until the threat is neutralized. A few weeks, maybe a month. And then? And then you go back to your life. Debt-free. It sounded perfect. It sounded like a fairy tale. But a nagging voice in my head warned me that fairy tales usually had monsters in them. The next few days settled into a strange rhythm. Megan went to classes escorted by a driver and a guard. I visited Dad at the hospital, also escorted. Anthony was gone during the day, running his empire. But he was always there in the evenings. One night, he came home later than usual, looking exhausted. There was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Is everything okay?" I asked. I was in the kitchen, making tea. He rubbed his face. "Business complications. Nothing for you to worry about. Does it involve the Russians?" He paused, then sighed. "Indirectly. They're pushing back. They didn't like being chased off. Are we safe here?" "Yes. This building is a fortress. But..." He hesitated. "I have to go to Miami for a few days. Tomorrow." Panic flared in my chest. "You're leaving?" "I have to handle something personally. My security team will stay with you. Nothing changes. But..." I stopped myself. Why did I care? He was just my benefactor, my protector, not my friend. Definitely not anything more. "Okay, be safe." He looked at me, a strange intensity in his gaze. "I always am." He left the next morning before I woke up. The apartment felt huge and empty without him. I went through the motions, visiting Dad, talking to Megan, but a low-level anxiety hummed under my skin. 3 days passed, then 4. On the 5th night, I couldn't sleep. I was in the kitchen at 2 a.m., staring into the fridge, when the elevator chimed. I froze. Anthony wasn't due back until tomorrow. The doors opened and he stumbled out. He was leaning heavily on a man I recognized as his head of security, a guy named Marcus. Anthony's face was pale, beaded with sweat. He was clutching his left side. "Anthony!" I rushed forward. "It's fine," he gritted out, his voice tight with pain. "Just a scratch." "He was shot," Marcus said grimly, helping him to the sofa. "Grazed the ribs." But he refused to go to a hospital. "Hospitals ask questions," Anthony rasped. "I have a doctor on call. He's 20 minutes out," Marcus said. "Boss, you're bleeding through the dressing." I looked at Anthony's side. His white shirt was stained dark red, the blood spreading. "I'm a pharmacist," I said, my professional instincts kicking in over the panic. "I know basic first aid. Let me look at it." Anthony looked up at me, eyes hazy with pain. "Lauren, shut up and let me help." I ordered Marcus to get the first aid kit from the bathroom. I'd seen it. It was stocked like a trauma center. I knelt beside Anthony and gently peeled back his jacket. He hissed in a breath. The wound was nasty, a jagged tear along his lower ribs. It was bleeding sluggishly but steadily. "It needs stitches," I said, assessing it. "But I can clean it and stop the bleeding until the doctor gets here." Do it, he said, closing his eyes. I worked quickly, my hands steady despite my racing heart. I cut away his shirt, cleaned the wound with antiseptic. He flinched but didn't make a sound, and applied pressure with sterile pads. Talk to me, I said, trying to keep him focused. What happened in Miami? Disagreement, he mumbled. Negotiations broke down. You mean someone shot you? Occupational hazard. You have a terrible occupation. He chuckled, which turned into a grimace. Pays well, though. I kept pressure on the wound, feeling the heat of his skin under my hands. His breathing was shallow, but steady. You stayed, he whispered after a moment, opening his eyes to look at me. What? You could have run. When you saw this, when you saw the reality of it, most people would have run. I'm not most people, I said softly. And you saved my family. I'm not going to let you bleed out on your designer sofa. He lifted a hand, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. His touch was warm, gentle. You're extraordinary, Lauren. The moment hung suspended in the air, thick with something that wasn't just gratitude or adrenaline. My heart hammered against my ribs, a different kind of rhythm now. The elevator chimed again. The doctor. I pulled back, clearing my throat. Saved by the bell. The doctor took over, stitching him up right there in the living room while I stood back, watching. Anthony refused pain meds beyond a local anesthetic, his eyes tracking me the whole time. When it was done, and the doctor and Marcus had left us alone, at Anthony's insistence, he was lying back on the sofa, shirt off, a fresh bandage around his torso. You should sleep, I said, hovering by the hallway. Stay, he said. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. I hesitated, then walked over and sat on the coffee table facing him. Does it hurt? Less than it should. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. Thank you. Just returning the favor. He ran his thumb over my knuckles. In Miami, all I could think about was getting back here. To make sure you were safe. I was fine. You're the one who got shot. I realized something, he said, his voice dropping lower. I didn't just want to come back to check on the asset. I wanted to come back to you. My breath hitched. Anthony, I know. It's complicated. I'm dangerous. My life is chaos. He pulled my hand closer, pressing a kiss to my palm. But you make me want to be better. Careful. I stared at him. This powerful, wounded man who held my hand like it was a lifeline. The lines between protector and something else were blurring so fast I couldn't see them anymore. You should rest, I whispered, though I didn't pull my hand away. Stay with me, just until I fall asleep. So I did. I sat there, in the quiet dark of the penthouse, holding the hand of a mafia boss, watching his chest rise and fall, and realizing with a terrified certainty that I was falling in love with him. The next morning, the atmosphere in the apartment had shifted. Anthony was up and moving, albeit stiffly, by the time I came out for coffee. He was at the island, reading a tablet, wearing a loose t-shirt that did nothing to hide the bandage or the muscles of his arms. How are you feeling? I asked, pouring a cup. Like I went a few rounds with a heavyweight, he admitted. But alive, thanks to you. The doctor did the hard part. You kept me conscious, and you didn't panic. He set the tablet down. I have a proposition for you. I tensed. What kind of proposition? My organization. We have legitimate businesses too. Pharmaceuticals, medical supplies. We're expanding that division. I need someone I can trust to oversee the compliance, the inventory. Someone who knows the industry but isn't tainted by corporate bureaucracy. I stared at him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career, real money, safety, and a way to help me clean up that part of the business. Make it truly legitimate. Is this charity again? No, it's me needing your brain. And maybe, he hesitated, maybe wanting a reason to keep you around after the Russians are dealt with. The admission hung there. I can't work for the mob, Anthony. Work for Verciani Holdings. The legal side. Help me make it better. I thought about the pharmacy, the double shifts, the red tape, the exhaustion. I thought about working alongside him, building something. I'll think about it, I said finally. He smiled. That's all I ask. Just then his phone rang. He answered it, his expression shifting instantly from warm to cold steel. When? He demanded. Are you sure? He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. Get the car, he snapped, hanging up. What is it? I asked, alarm spiking. The Russians, he said, standing up and wincing slightly. They made a move, not against me. Who? Your father's hospital. My blood ran cold. What? They didn't touch him, he assured me quickly. But they sent a message, a localized power outage, just his wing. The backup generators kicked in, he's fine. But it was a threat. They know he's my weak point because of you. Oh my God. I'm going there now. To move him. I'm coming with you. Lauren, it's not safe. He's my father. I'm coming. He looked at me, saw the resolve in my face and nodded. Okay. But you stay with Marcus. Do exactly what he says. Deal. We raced to the hospital in the convoy. The tension in the car was suffocating. When we arrived, it was chaos. Nurses running, security everywhere. We found Dad in his room, confused but okay. The power was back on. Lauren, he asked weakly as I rushed in. What's going on? Who are these men? It's okay, Dad. We're moving you to a better facility, a private one. But the insurance? It's handled, Anthony said from the doorway. Everything is handled, Mr. Mitchell. Dad looked at him, then at me. Who is this? A friend, I said firmly. A very good friend. We got Dad moved to a private clinic Anthony owned uptown. It was a fortress disguised as a hospital. Once he was settled, and Megan was brought there too for safety, I collapsed onto a chair in the waiting room. Anthony sat beside me. I'm sorry, he said grimly. I thought they would target me directly. Going after a sick man. It's desperate, sloppy. It worked, I said, voice trembling. It scared me. That was the point. Fear makes people make mistakes. He took my hand, but they made the mistake. They made it personal. What are you going to do? His eyes were dark voids. I'm going to end it. Tonight. Anthony, stay here, with your family. You're safe here. He stood up. Come back, I whispered. He looked down at me, and for a second his mask slipped. I saw the exhaustion, the weight of his world, and the fierce protectiveness underneath. Always, he promised. He walked out, trailing danger like smoke. I watched him go, knowing that tonight people would die because they had threatened me. And the most terrifying part wasn't the violence. It was that I wanted him to do it. I wanted him to burn them down for touching my family. I had crossed the line. I was in his world now. And looking at the closed doors, I knew there was no going back. My first week in Anthony Verciani's penthouse was a lesson in the architecture of power. It wasn't just the marble floors or the art that Megan couldn't stop staring at. It was the silence. The world outside, the sirens, the subway rumble, the constant friction of Brooklyn, didn't exist up here. The windows were thick enough to mute a hurricane, and the air smelled of filtered oxygen and expensive cedar. Megan adjusted quickly, treating the situation like a bizarre scholarship program. She went to her classes in a black sedan driven by a man named Sal, who looked like a refrigerator in a suit, but apparently let her choose the radio station. She came back in the evenings bubbling with stories, safe and untouchable. I, however, felt like a ghost haunting a palace. My days were spent in a strange limbo. I visited Dad at the private clinic uptown, also owned by Anthony's network. He was responding well to the new treatment. His color was returning, his voice stronger. Every time I saw him, the knot in my chest loosened a little more. But then I'd return to the empty penthouse, wandering rooms that felt too large, waiting for the sound of the elevator. Anthony was a phantom during the day. He left before we woke up and often returned long after Megan had gone to bed, but he was always there for dinner. It became our routine. He'd come in, shedding his suit jacket and the cold armor of his business, and for an hour or two, he was just Anthony. He cooked. That was the first surprise. On the third night, I walked into the kitchen to find him rolling out pasta dough on the marble island, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, flour dusting his forearms. "You cook?" I asked, stopping in the doorway. He glanced up, a smudge of flour on his cheek. "My nonna would rise from her grave if I didn't." "Grab an apron, Lauren. You can help with the sauce." We fell into an easy rhythm. He taught me how to crush tomatoes by hand, how to tell when the garlic was perfectly golden, how to balance acidity with a pinch of sugar. We talked about everything except the reason I was there. We talked about books, about the best coffee spots in the city. He admitted Joe's Diner was a guilty pleasure. About Megan's architecture projects. But tonight, the air felt different. Heavy. We were eating risotto at the kitchen island. Megan was in her room studying for a midterm. Anthony had opened a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my first car, but he was barely drinking it. He pushed his food around his plate, his usual focus fractured. "You're quiet tonight," I said, watching him. He set his fork down. "Just complications." "The Russians?" "No, something else. Old business." He looked at me then, his dark eyes intense. "My mother died of cancer when I was 16. The confession came out of nowhere." I froze, my wine glass halfway to my lips. "Anthony?" I didn't know. It was pancreatic, fast, brutal. He picked up his glass, swirling the red liquid. My father was not present. He was busy building the empire. I was the one who took her to appointments. I sat in the waiting rooms. I fought with insurance companies who tried to deny coverage because of experimental procedures. His voice was steady, but there was a jagged edge to it that cut straight through me. "That's why," I whispered. "That's why you helped my dad." He looked at me. "I saw your file, Lauren. I saw the denial letters from the insurance. I saw the collection notices. And I remembered what it felt like to be helpless in front of a system that decides who lives and who dies based on a spreadsheet. You weren't helpless," I said softly. "You were a child. I was old enough to know that money is the only shield that matters." He took a sip of wine. "When I saw you fighting for him, selling your things, working yourself into the ground, I couldn't watch it happen again. Not when I could stop it with a signature." I felt tears prick my eyes. For days I had wondered what his angle was. I had looked for the catch, the hidden cost. But this was just shared trauma, recognized across the divide of our different worlds. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "I haven't said it enough. You saved him. You saved him." He corrected. "I just paid the bill." He stood up abruptly, as if he'd revealed too much. "I have to check some emails. Finish your wine." He retreated to his study, but the connection between us remained, vibrating in the silence. The next day, Anthony didn't leave for the office. Instead, he found me in the library, a room filled with first editions and leather armchairs that smelled of old paper. "Italian lessons," he announced, dropping a stack of books on the desk. I looked up from my novel. "Excuse me? If you're going to be around me, you need to understand what's being said. Half my business is conducted in Italian. It's a safety issue. I thought I was only going to be here a few weeks. Knowledge is never wasted. Come on, andiamo." So began the lessons. We sat side by side at the heavy oak desk. He was a patient teacher, though demanding. He made me repeat vowels until my mouth ached, correcting my pronunciation with a seriousness that made me want to laugh and hide at the same time. "No," he said, leaning closer. "It's voglio, not volio. Soft G, like this." He tapped his own throat, demonstrating the sound. I tried again. Better. He reached out to turn the page of the textbook, and his hand brushed mine. A spark, hot and electric, shot up my arm. I froze. He froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. His hand rested next to mine on the paper. I could feel the heat radiating from him. I looked up and found him watching me, his gaze dropping to my lips, then back to my eyes. The air in the room suddenly felt too thin. "Lauren," he murmured, his voice rougher than usual. I leaned in. I couldn't help it. Gravity was pulling me toward him, toward the danger and the safety he represented. His phone rang. The sound was jarring, a violent intrusion. Anthony flinched, the spell breaking instantly. He snatched the phone from the desk, seeing the caller ID. His expression hardened into stone. "Verziani," he answered. Standing up and walking to the window, I watched his back muscles tense under his shirt. He listened for a long time, saying nothing. "When?" he asked finally. A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "I'm on my way to the airfield. Have the jet prepped." He hung up and turned to me. The warmth was gone. He was the Don again. "I have to go," he said. "What's happening?" I stood up, fear coiling in my stomach. "Sinaloa," he said, the name sounding like a curse. "The cartel. They've pushed into our southern distribution lines in Miami. They hit a warehouse an hour ago." "You're going there?" "I have to show presence. If I don't, they'll think I'm weak. They'll push further north." "Is it dangerous?" It was a stupid question. Of course it was dangerous. "It's necessary," he evaded. "My security team here remains. Nothing changes for you. Stay inside. Keep Megan inside. When will you be back?" "When it's done." He walked out of the library without looking back. 10 minutes later, I heard the elevator chime. He was gone. The next 4 days were an eternity. The penthouse felt cavernous. I distracted myself with Dad, who was now walking laps around his room, and with Megan, who was blissfully unaware of the turf war happening 1,000 miles away. But at night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, checking news alerts for Miami, looking for reports of gang violence, shootings, anything. Silence. I missed him. That was the terrifying truth. I missed the cooking. I missed the Italian lessons. I missed the way he made me feel safe in a world that was fundamentally unsafe. On the 4th night, the elevator chimed at 2 a.m. I was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of herbal tea I didn't want. I spun around as the doors opened. Anthony stepped out. He looked like hell. His suit was rumpled, his face drawn and pale. He was favoring his left side, his movements stiff. "Anthony!" I set the mug down and rushed to him. "I'm fine," he said immediately, holding up a hand. "Just tired. You're hurt." I could see it in the way he held himself. "What happened?" "Disagreement," he said dryly. "We won the argument, but they got in a lucky shot." Marcus, his head of security, stepped out behind him carrying a medical bag. "Grazed the ribs, Miss Mitchell. He refused the hospital." "Of course he did," I muttered. "Bring him to the sofa." I took over. It was instinct, the pharmacist in me pushing aside the frightened woman. I ordered Marcus to get me warm water and towels. I made Anthony sit, helping him off with his jacket. His shirt was stuck to his side with dried blood. "This is going to hurt," I warned, peeling the fabric away. He hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. The wound was an angry red furrow along his ribs. It wasn't deep enough to be life-threatening, but it needed cleaning and restitching. "I can do this," I said, examining it. "I have suture kits in my bag. I brought them from the pharmacy just in case." "Resourceful," he grunted, head tipped back against the cushions. I worked in silence, cleaning the wound, numbing the area with lidocaine I'd also swiped. My hands were steady. I stitched the skin closed, focused entirely on the task. "You have gentle hands," he whispered. I tied off the last suture and taped a sterile bandage over it. "Done. You need antibiotics." "I have those too." I sat back on my heels, finally looking at his face. He was watching me with that same intensity from the library, but magnified by pain and exhaustion. "You came back?" I said softly. "I told you I would. You're an idiot for not going to a hospital." "I wanted to come home," he said. "To you." The air left the room. "Anthony." He reached out with his good arm, his hand cupping my cheek. His thumb traced my lower lip. "I missed you, Lauren. In Miami, with bullets flying. All I could think about was this kitchen. You." "I was worried," I admitted, leaning into his touch. "I was so worried." "Don't be. I'm hard to kill." He pulled me closer. I didn't resist. I moved carefully, mindful of his injury until our faces were inches apart. I could smell the antiseptic, the copper scent of blood, and beneath it all, him. Cedar and rain. "Is this okay?" he murmured, his gaze searching mine. "Yes," I breathed. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and 4 days of fear. His mouth was hot on mine, demanding. I kissed him back with everything I had, my hands tangling in his hair, careful of his ribs but needing to be close. It felt like a collision, like the breaking of a dam. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I can't let you go," he whispered, his voice raw. I tried to convince myself this was temporary, but I can't. "I don't want to go," I confessed, the truth tumbling out. He kissed me again, softer this time, a promise, and in the quiet of the penthouse, with the city lights burning below us, I knew I was in trouble, deep, dangerous trouble, and I didn't care. The morning after he returned from Miami, Anthony looked less like a mythical underworld king and more like a man who had lost a fight with a sidewalk. He sat at the kitchen island, shirtless, letting me change his dressings. The bruising around the stitches was a deep, angry purple, blooming across his ribs like a storm cloud. "You're healing well," I noted, taping the fresh gauze down. "No infection." "Good nurse," he murmured, catching my hand before I could pull away. He pressed a kiss to my wrist, right over my pulse. "Thank you," I flushed, pulling my hand back to pick up my coffee. "Don't get used to it. I have a job to get back to." He frowned. "Lauren, we talked about this. It's not safe yet." "It's been a week since the Russians threatened the hospital," I argued. "Megan is back in classes. Dad is safe at the clinic. If I don't go back to the pharmacy, Paulina is going to have a breakdown. She's working double shifts covering for me. I can pay Paulina's salary for the next 10 years. She'll be fine. It's not about the money, Anthony. It's about normalcy. I need to feel like myself again. Not just a guest in your tower." He studied me, seeing the stubborn set of my jaw. He sighed, wincing slightly as his ribs protested. "Fine. But Marcus drives you. He stays in the store, and you wear the panic button I gave you. Deal." Going back to work felt surreal. The familiar smell of antiseptic and cheap carpet cleaner hit me as I walked in, grounding me. Paulina nearly tackled me with a hug. "I thought you'd been kidnapped by a millionaire," she exclaimed, eyeing Marcus, who had taken up a silent post by the door like a gargoyle in a suit. "Is that him? Or is Muscle?" "Muscle," I whispered. "It's complicated." The day passed in a blur of prescriptions and insurance calls. It was exhausting, mundane, and perfect. I felt useful. I felt like Lauren Mitchell, pharmacist, not Lauren Mitchell, mob girlfriend. The trouble started 2 days later. It was inventory night. Usually Paulina and I split it, but her daughter was sick, so I offered to do it solo. Marcus wasn't happy about it, pacing the front of the store while I counted boxes of amoxicillin in the back. "I'm going to check the perimeter," Marcus grunted around 10 p.m. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." Okay. I locked the door and went back to the stockroom. It was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I was up on a ladder, counting inhalers on the top shelf, when I heard the front door chime. I froze. I had locked it. The chime sounded again, the distinctive ding-dong of the sensor, then voices, low, urgent. Panic spiked in my chest. I scrambled down the ladder, silent as a ghost. Had Marcus come back? No, he would have knocked. Someone had picked the lock or had a key. I crept toward the door that separated the stockroom from the main floor. It was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack. 2 men stood near the register. Neither was Marcus. One was tall, wearing a heavy coat. The other was shorter, nervous, pacing. I recognized the shorter one immediately. Officer Miller. He was a regular. Came in for his cholesterol meds. Always flirted badly with Paulina. A cop. "Said the gala is the target," Miller was saying, his voice tight. "Thursday night. The St. Jude's benefit. Versiani will be there?" the tall man asked. His voice was gravelly, accented. Not Russian. Sicilian. "He's the guest of honor. He donated $500,000. He'll be on the podium at 9 p.m. Security? Tight, but we have a guy on the inside, the loading dock. We get the device in through catering. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. A device. A bomb. They were talking about bombing the gala. And the backup plan? The tall man asked. If the device fails, we have shooters. Roof access is clear. Vincent made sure of it. Vincent. I knew that name. Anthony had mentioned him once. A capo, a lieutenant in his organization. Someone close. Someone trusted. My blood ran cold. A traitor. A cop and a traitor, working together to kill Anthony. I needed proof. Anthony wouldn't believe a random accusation against his own man without evidence. I pulled my phone from my pocket with trembling fingers. I held it up to the crack in the door, pressing record on the video app. You sure Vincent is solid? Miller asked. Vincent hates Verziani. He thinks he's gone soft. Buying debts, protecting stray girls. He wants the old ways back. He's with the family now. The tall man turned, his profile coming into view. I zoomed in, capturing his face, Miller's badge number, everything. Suddenly the tall man stopped. He sniffed the air. You hear that? Hear what? Someone's here. My heart stopped. The AC unit in the stockroom had rattled. Check the back, the tall man ordered, pulling a gun from his coat. I didn't think. I reacted. I stopped recording, shoved the phone in my bra, and bolted for the rear emergency exit. It was alarmed, but I had the key. I jammed it in, turned it, and shoved the heavy metal door open just as the stockroom door burst inward behind me. Hey! A voice roared. A gunshot cracked, the sound deafening in the small space. A bullet pinged off the metal frame inches from my head. I burst into the alleyway, screaming. Marcus! Marcus! Marcus appeared from around the corner, gun already drawn. He saw me running, saw the man in the doorway raising a weapon. Marcus fired twice. The man in the doorway jerked back and collapsed. Get in the car! Marcus roared, grabbing my arm and practically throwing me toward the SUV parked at the curb. He shoved me into the back seat and jumped in the front, peeling away from the curb with a screech of tires just as Officer Miller ran out the back door, firing wildly. Are you hit? Marcus yelled, weaving through traffic. No, I'm okay. I was hyperventilating, clutching my chest. Marcus, they're going to kill him. Thursday night. The gala. Call the boss. Now. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I dialed Anthony. Lauren? His voice was warm, sleepy. Are you done with Anthony, listen to me. I screamed. Trap. It's a trap. Vincent is a traitor. The line went silent for a split second. Then his voice changed. Cold. Sharp. Where are you? In the car with Marcus. We were at the pharmacy. Officer Miller, the cop. He met a guy. A Sicilian. They're planting a bomb at the gala. Vincent let them in. Vincent is working with them. Is Marcus with you? Yes, we're driving fast. Put him on. I handed the phone to Marcus. Boss. Yeah, contact made. One hostile down. We're hot. Understood. Safe house. Check. Marcus hung up and tossed the phone back to me. We're not going to the penthouse. It might be compromised if Vincent is turning. Where are we going? Upstate. The farm. We drove for 3 hours into the darkness of rural New York. My adrenaline crashed halfway there, leaving me shaking and cold. I curled up in the back seat, replaying the conversation I'd overheard. Vincent hates Verziani. He thinks he's gone soft, protecting stray girls. Because of me. They were targeting him because he helped me. The guilt was a physical weight in my stomach. We arrived at a farmhouse down a long gravel driveway around 2 a.m. It looked rustic, but the perimeter lights snapped on as we approached, and I saw cameras everywhere. Anthony was waiting on the porch. As soon as the car stopped, I was out the door and running into his arms. He caught me, wincing as I hit his bad ribs, but holding me tight. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. You're safe. I'm sorry, I sobbed. It's my fault. They said you went soft because of me. Shh, look at me. He pulled back, framing my face with his hands. Vincent is a greedy snake. If it wasn't you, he would have found another excuse. He wants the chair. That's all. Inside, The farmhouse was warm. Anthony sat me down at the kitchen table and poured me a glass of water. Tell me everything. Exactly what you heard. I took a breath and pulled my phone out. I did better. I recorded it. Anthony's eyebrows shot up. You recorded it? I needed proof. I knew you wouldn't believe me about Vincent otherwise. I played the video. The audio was clear. Miller's voice. The Sicilian's voice. Vincent made sure of it. Anthony watched it twice. His face was a mask of terrifying calm. When it finished, he looked at me with something like awe. You were being shot at, he said quietly. And you held onto the phone? I hid it in my bra. He let out a short, sharp laugh. Remind me never to play poker with you, Lauren. He stood up, pacing the kitchen. Okay, this changes everything. We know the plan. Bomb and catering. Shooters on the roof. Vincent thinks he's clear. What are you going to do? Cancel the gala? No. He stopped, turning to me. If I cancel, they'll know I know. They'll go to ground. Vincent will run. I need to draw them out. The gala happens. But the bomb. We'll find it. My team will sweep catering before anything comes in. We'll intercept the shooters. And Vincent, his eyes darkened. I'll deal with Vincent personally. When? Tomorrow. I've called a meeting. Here. The inner circle. Vincent will come because he has to maintain cover. Here? But I'm here. Exactly. You're the witness. But you won't be in the room. There's a mirror in the study. Two-way glass. You'll watch. Why? Because I want you to see who he really is. And I want you to understand what happens to traitors. If you're going to be in my life, Lauren, you need to know the ugly parts too. The next afternoon, the cars arrived. 5 black SUVs rolling up the gravel drive. Men in suits got out, looking serious. I recognized a few faces from the penthouse security detail. And then I saw him. Vincent. He was older than Anthony, with silver hair and a grandfatherly face. He was smiling, clapping other men on the back. He looked normal, like a favorite uncle. It made my stomach turn. Anthony hid me in the small observation room behind the study. It was dark, cramped. Through the mirror, I could see the entire study. Anthony sat behind a massive desk. The men filed in. Vincent took the chair closest to the desk. Boss, Vincent said warmly. Good to see you up. How's the side? Better, Anthony said, his voice flat. Though it aches when the weather changes, or when I smell a rat. The room went still. A rat? Vincent frowned. You think we have a leak? Not a leak, Vincent. A flood. Anthony tossed a file onto the desk. The Russians in Miami were a distraction. The real play was always here. New York. Who would dare? Vincent asked, looking around the room indignantly. Someone who thinks I've lost my edge, Anthony said. Someone who thinks saving a civilian makes me weak. Vincent didn't flinch. He was good. Civilian entanglements can be distracting, boss. We've all said it. Have we? Or just you? I only want what's best for the family, Anthony. You know that. I bounced you on my knee. I know. Anthony said softly. That's why this hurts. He pressed a button on his laptop. The audio from my recording filled the room. Miller's voice. Vincent made sure of it. Vincent hates Verziani. Vincent's face went slack. The color drained out of him so fast he looked gray. He stood up, reaching for his waistband. Before he could even touch his gun, 3 other men in the room had theirs drawn and pointed at his head. Marcus stepped forward and removed Vincent's weapon. Sit down, Anthony commanded. Vincent collapsed back into the chair. It's a fake. A recording. We have the video. Anthony cut him off. And we have the witness. She's safe, Vincent. You missed. Vincent looked at Anthony, his eyes filled with hate. She's ruining us. You're distracted. You're weak. The Sicilian families. They offered strength. Order. They offered you 30 pieces of silver. Anthony said with disgust. You sold us out for a promise of power you couldn't even hold. Anthony stood up and walked around the desk. He stood over Vincent. You were my father's friend, Anthony said. You were family. Your father would be ashamed of you. Vincent spat. Anthony pulled a gun from his holster. A sleek, black pistol. I flinched behind the glass. I wanted to look away. I should have looked away. But Anthony had brought me here to see this, to see the cost. My father is dead, Anthony said coldly. And now, so are you. He fired. Once. Clean. Vincent slumped forward onto the desk. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. Anthony Verziani was a killer. I had known it theoretically. Now I knew it viscerally. He had just executed a man he'd known his whole life without hesitation. But he had done it to protect me, to protect his people. The door to the observation room opened. Anthony stood there, holstering his gun. He looked at me, searching my face for revulsion, for fear. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked past him at the body in the study. Then I looked back at him. "He would have killed you," I said. My voice was steady. "At the gala. He would have blown you up." "Yes." "Then you did what you had to do." Anthony let out a long exhale, his shoulders dropping an inch. "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But not of you. I'm afraid for you." He stepped into the small room and pulled me into a hug. He smelled of gunpowder and cologne. I buried my face in his chest, holding on tight. "The gala is in 2 days," he said into my hair. "We still have to go. We have to flush out the rest of them. The Sicilians. Miller. We?" I pulled back. "You're not going," he said firmly. "It's too dangerous." "I'm going," I said. "I'm the only one who knows Miller's face besides you. I can spot him in the crowd if he tries to get close. And," I took a deep breath, "if I'm going to be with you, Anthony, I can't hide in a farmhouse while you walk into a trap." "I'm in." "All the way." He stared at me, conflict warring in his eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay, but you wear a vest, and you never leave my side." "Deal." We walked out of the room together, leaving the dead traitor behind us. I wasn't just the pharmacist anymore. I wasn't just the girl who threw coffee. I was part of this now, part of him, and God help anyone who tried to hurt us. The St. Jude's charity gala was held in a ballroom that dripped with crystal and old money. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. Men in tuxedos, women in couture gowns, photographers flashing bulbs at the entrance. From the inside, as I walked through the metal detectors disguised as floral arches, it felt like a battlefield. I wore a floor-length burgundy silk dress with a high slit and long sleeves. It was stunning, elegant, and specifically tailored to hide the Kevlar vest strapped tight against my ribs and the small tracking device pinned inside the hem. My hair was swept up, exposing my neck where a diamond necklace, a gift from Anthony, for luck, glittered cold against my skin. Anthony walked beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. He looked devastating in a black tuxedo, but I could feel the tension in his grip. His eyes never stopped moving, scanning the crowd, the exits, the waiters. "Smile," he murmured against my ear as we stepped into the main hall. "We're the happy couple, not the hunting party." I forced a smile, clutching my clutch bag which contained only my phone and a spare magazine for the gun Anthony carried. "Do you see him? Miller?" "Not yet. Marcus has the perimeter. If he's here, we'll find him." We moved through the crowd, a shark swimming through a school of fish. People stopped us constantly. Senators, socialites, business rivals. Anthony introduced me simply as Lauren, offering no explanation for my presence or my sudden elevation from pharmacist to gala date. I played the part, nodding at the right times, laughing at unfunny jokes, discussing the charity's work with a fluency that seemed to surprise them. "You're a natural," Anthony whispered, after we escaped a particularly chatty banking CEO. "I deal with angry customers trying to refill expired narcotics prescriptions," I muttered. "Rich people are easy. You just let them talk about themselves. Remind me to give you a raise. I don't work for you yet." Yet. The ballroom was suffocatingly warm. I scanned the faces constantly, looking for Miller's nervous eyes or the Sicilian's sharp profile. Nothing. The catering staff moved efficiently, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Anthony's team had swept the kitchen an hour ago and found nothing. No bomb. Maybe they called it off, I whispered, taking a champagne flute I had no intention of drinking, after Vincent disappeared. No, Anthony said, his gaze fixed on the podium at the front of the room. They're committed. If the bomb isn't in the kitchen, it's already here. He checked his watch. 8:45 p.m. 15 minutes until his speech. Let's dance, he said abruptly. What? If we stand still, we're targets. On the floor, we're moving. Come. He led me onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Anthony pulled me close, his hand firm on my waist. We moved together easily, a strange counterpoint to the danger humming in the air. You look beautiful, he said, looking down at me. I haven't said it properly. I'm wearing a bulletproof vest, Anthony, and you make it look like couture. His expression sobered. Lauren, if this goes sideways, you run. You don't wait for me. Marcus has orders to get you out first. I'm not leaving you. You have to. You have a sister, a father, and I have you. The words slipped out before I could check them. He stopped moving for a split second, disrupting our rhythm. Say that again. I have you, I repeated, looking him in the eye. I'm not running. He stared at me, raw emotion cracking his composure. You are the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to me, Lauren Mitchell. Is that a complaint? It's a confession. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. I love you. If we survive tonight, I'm never letting you go. My heart slammed against my ribs. He loved me. The mafia boss who had bought my father's debt, who had killed a traitor in front of me, who was currently hunting assassins in a ballroom. He loved me. And God help me, I loved him back. Suddenly the music seemed to fade. A glint of light caught my eye. High up, on the balcony overlooking the dance floor, a red dot. It was faint, dancing across the shoulder of a woman nearby, then steadying. On Anthony's chest. Time slowed. The red laser settled right over his heart. Down! I screamed. I shoved him with all my strength. He stumbled back, off balance. Crack. The gunshot was deafening. The crystal chandelier above us exploded in a shower of glass. A woman screamed. Then chaos. Shooter! Balcony! Marcus's voice roared over the comms Anthony wore. Anthony grabbed me, pulling me down as the crowd stampeded. Move! Low! Another shot rang out, chipping the marble floor inches from my foot. We scrambled behind an overturned table. Anthony had his gun out instantly, scanning the balcony. Marcus, status! He barked into his earpiece. 2 shooters, east balcony, engaging! Gunfire erupted from above. Automatic fire this time. The crowd was screaming, a tide of panic surging toward the exits. The bomb! Anthony gasped, looking around wildly. The shooters are a distraction. Where is the bomb? I looked around from our crouched position. The podium. It was directly under the main vent. The flower arrangement, I pointed. On the podium. It wasn't there when we came in. A massive centerpiece of lilies and hydrangeas sat on the stage. It looked innocuous, but something about the base was too bulky. Miller, Anthony hissed. He must have planted it during the confusion. We have to clear the room. It's too crowded. If it blows now. Anthony stood up, exposing himself. Get to the exit, he yelled at me. What are you doing? I'm getting the bomb. He sprinted toward the stage, weaving through the panicked crowd. Bullets chased him, kicking up dust and debris. Anthony! I screamed. I didn't run to the exit. I ran after him. He vaulted onto the stage, grabbing the massive flower arrangement. He ripped the flowers out, revealing a metal box with a timer ticking down. Ujo 45. 45 seconds. Lauren, go, he roared, seeing me. Throw it, I yelled, pointing to the heavy velvet curtains covering the floor-to-ceiling windows behind the stage. The terrace! Throw it outside! He understood instantly. He grabbed the box and hurled it through the glass doors leading to the empty terrace. It shattered the pane and landed in the snow outside. He grabbed me and tackled me to the floor behind the heavy oak podium just as... Boom! The explosion shook the foundation of the building. Windows blew inward. The shockwave slammed into us. deafening and brutal. Dust and plaster rained down. Silence followed for a heartbeat. Then the moans of the injured, the alarms blaring. I coughed, waving away dust. Anthony? He was covering me with his body. He lifted his head, shaking debris from his hair. I'm okay. You? I'm okay. He pulled me up. We have to go. Now. Before they regroup. Marcus appeared at the side of the stage, his face bloodied but fierce. Shooters are down. Miller is in the wind, but we got the Sicilian. We need to extract. We ran. Through the kitchen, down the service corridors, out into the freezing night where the armored limousines were waiting. We piled in, breathless, covered in dust. As the car sped away, leaving the sirens behind, the adrenaline finally crashed. I started to shake violently. Anthony pulled me into his lap, holding me so tight it almost hurt. You didn't run, he whispered fiercely, burying his face in my neck. I told you to run. I told you I wouldn't. He pulled back, looking at my face, checking for injuries. He wiped a smudge of soot from my cheek with his thumb. You saved everyone, he said. You saw the flowers. You threw the bomb. We make a good team. He managed a weak smile. A terrifying team. We drove to the safe house in silence, simply holding on to each other. When we arrived, we didn't speak. We went straight to the shower, washing the dust and blood and fear away. And then we fell into bed, not for sex, but for the desperate need to feel alive, to feel skin against skin. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the window felt like a miracle. I woke up wrapped in Anthony's arms. He was already awake, watching me. Marry me, he said. I blinked, sleep-fogged. What? Marry me. Be my wife. Be my partner. I don't want to do this without you anymore. I propped myself up on an elbow. Anthony, we almost died last night. This is adrenaline talking. No, it's clarity. Last night, when that laser was on my chest, my only regret was that I hadn't made you mine completely, that I hadn't put a ring on your finger and told the world to back off. He sat up, reaching for his pants on the floor. He pulled out a small velvet box from the pocket. I've had this for a week, he admitted. Since you stitched me up on the sofa. He opened it. A vintage emerald ring, surrounded by diamonds, glittered in the morning light. It was my grandmother's, he said. She was the only woman my grandfather ever feared, and the only one he ever loved. I looked at the ring, then at him. The bruises on his ribs, the determination in his eyes. I thought about my quiet life at the pharmacy, the safety of boredom, and then I thought about the fire I felt when I was with him. The purpose. Yes, I whispered. His face broke into a grin of pure relief. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Yes, he repeated, pulling me into a kiss. Yes, I'll marry you, but on one condition. Anything. I get to keep my job, at least part-time. I'm not just going to be a trophy wife, Anthony Versiani. He laughed, a deep, rich sound. Lauren, after last night? You're not a trophy. You're the artillery. We spent the day in the safe house, planning. Not a wedding. That would be small, private. But a war. Miller was still out there. The remnants of the Sicilian faction were still a threat. Miller isn't a mastermind, Anthony said, looking at the tablet Marcus had brought in. He's a pawn. He'll try to run. He'll go to his sister's, I said suddenly. Anthony looked at me. How do you know? He talks about her at the pharmacy. She lives in Jersey. He pays her rent. Whenever he's in trouble with his gambling debts, he talks about needing to visit Francine. Anthony stared at me. You remember all that? I listened to my customers. Marcus, Anthony barked. Find Francine Miller in New Jersey. Send a team. 2 hours later, Marcus came back. Got him. He was packing his car. He's in custody. He's singing like a bird. Gave up the whole Sicilian network in exchange for protection from you. Let the feds have him, Anthony said dismissively. He's useless to us now. The threat is neutralized. It was over. Just like that. That evening, Anthony took me out to the balcony of the safe house. The sun was setting over the snowy fields. I want to introduce you, he said, Properly. To who? To the family, my capos, the organization, tonight at the warehouse. I want them to see you, to know who you are, as your fiancé, as my equal. We drove back to the city in a convoy. The warehouse in Queens was massive, filled with men in suits. When we walked in, the conversation died instantly. Anthony led me to the center of the room. He didn't hide me behind him. He stood beside me, his hand holding mine for everyone to see. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing in the silent space. "This is Lauren. She saved my life last night. She saved many of your lives." He looked around the room, making eye contact with his lieutenants. "She is my future wife. She speaks for me. You will show her the same respect you show me. Is that understood?" "Sigh, boss." The room rumbled in unison. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. Anthony turned to me, raising my hand to his lips. "Welcome to the family, Lauren." I looked at the sea of faces, then at the man beside me, the monster who loved me, the killer who had saved my father. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. We left soon after, heading back to the penthouse, back to our fortress in the sky. In the car, I rested my head on his shoulder. "So," I murmured. "Mafia Queen. Is there a handbook?" "You write the handbook," he said, kissing my forehead. "Rule number 1. Throw coffee first. Ask questions later." I laughed, feeling the weight of the ring on my finger. It felt heavy. It felt like an anchor, but for the first time in my life I wasn't drifting. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We arrived at the penthouse. The elevator opened and the silence greeted us. But it wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. "I have a surprise," Anthony said, leading me to the kitchen. On the counter was a stack of files. "What's this?" "The paperwork for Versiani Pharmaceuticals. It's a new subsidiary, fully legal, fully transparent." He tapped the top file. "And here is the offer letter for the Director of Compliance." I opened it. The salary was astronomical. The job description was exactly what I had dreamed of. Fixing the system from the inside. "Director?" I looked at him. "You wanted to work. So work. Build something good, Lauren. Balance out the other side of the business." I looked at him, tears stinging my eyes. He wasn't just giving me a job. He was giving me a purpose. A way to live in his world without losing my soul. "I accept," I whispered. "Good." He pulled me into his arms. "Now, Director Versiani, let's go to bed. We have a wedding to plan." I buried my face in his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, mine. The storm was over, or maybe we were just in the eye of it. Either way, I wasn't afraid of the rain anymore. I had learned to dance in it. 3 weeks of peace. In our world, that was an eternity. Life had settled into a rhythm that felt deceptively normal. I spent my days at the new Versiani Pharmaceuticals office in Midtown, building a compliance team from scratch. Anthony was busy restructuring the organization after the Sicilian betrayal, tightening the ranks. We met for dinner every night at the penthouse, cooking together, talking about our days like any other couple. Except our work talk involved FDA regulations and territorial disputes. Dad was discharged from the clinic, his cancer in remission. Anthony had set him up in a comfortable apartment near Central Park, complete with a nurse and a discreet security detail. Megan was thriving at Columbia, her architectural models taking over the dining room table on weekends. It was a Sunday afternoon. We were having a family lunch at the penthouse, Anthony, me, Dad, and Megan. The sun was streaming in, and for a moment, looking around the table, I let myself believe we were just a normal family. "So," Dad said, spooning more of Anthony's bolognese onto his plate. "Megan tells me she's seeing someone." I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. Megan hadn't mentioned this. Megan blushed, ducking her head. "Dad, it's new, it's nothing." "Who is he?" Anthony asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharpening instantly. The protector instinct never slept. "His name is Josh," Megan said, smiling shyly. "He's a grad student. Engineering. We met at the library." "Engineering," Anthony repeated. "Smart." "He's really sweet," Megan continued, eager now. "He's from Ohio. He volunteers at the animal shelter. He's just normal. Normal is good, I said, smiling at her. When can we meet him? Maybe next week? I don't want to scare him off with the, She gestured vaguely at the penthouse, at Marcus standing by the elevator. We'll be on our best behavior, Anthony promised. No scary bodyguards, just family. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I found Anthony in his study. He was staring at a tablet, his brow furrowed. What's wrong? I asked, massaging his shoulders. I ran a background check on this Josh, he admitted. Anthony, Megan asked for space. She's my family now too, Lauren. I check everyone. He tapped the screen. And Josh doesn't exist. I stopped. What do you mean? Joshua Evans, supposedly from Columbus, Ohio, grad student at Columbia. But there's no record of a Joshua Evans at Columbia. No transcripts, no social media prior to 6 months ago, no rental history in the city. My stomach dropped. Maybe he goes by a middle name? I ran facial recognition on the photo Megan posted on Instagram. He turned the tablet to me. The screen showed a side-by-side comparison. On the left, Megan's selfie with a smiling, wholesome-looking guy. On the right, a grim official photo. Agent Daniel Thorne, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I gasped, covering my mouth. Oh my God, he's a plant, Anthony said, his voice ice cold. He's using her to get to me, to get to us. Megan, she doesn't know. She really likes him. She's collateral damage to them. A way in. Anthony stood up, pacing. I'll handle it. Marcus can pick him up tonight. We'll find out what he knows and then... No! I grabbed his arm. Anthony, you can't just handle an FBI agent. That's war. That brings the entire federal government down on us. He targeted my family. And if you kill him, you confirm everything they suspect about you. Plus, think about Megan. If her boyfriend disappears, it will destroy her. So what do you suggest? We let him keep spying? Let me handle it. He looked at me like I was crazy. You? Lauren, this is a Fed. Exactly. He's not a hitman. He's an agent. He has rules, procedures. I took a deep breath. Let me talk to him. Alone. Absolutely not. Anthony, please. If you go in guns blazing, we lose. Let me find out what his angle is. Maybe we can use this. He stared at me for a long minute. Conflict warring in his eyes. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Fine, but you don't go alone. Marcus is in the car, and you wear a wire. I listened to every word. Deal. I texted Megan, asking for Josh's number under the guise of inviting him to a surprise birthday dinner for her. Then I texted him directly. Hi, Josh. It's Lauren. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I want to ask your help with a gift for Megan. Don't tell her. He replied instantly. Sure. 10 a.m. at the campus Starbucks? The next morning, I walked into the coffee shop wearing my sharpest blazer and heels. I spotted him immediately. He looked so young, so innocent. Just a kid in a hoodie. It made me sick. I bought 2 coffees and sat down opposite him. Hi, Lauren. He smiled, that same wholesome grin from the photo. It's great to finally meet you. Megan talks about you all the time. Does she? I smiled back, placing my phone on the table. She talks about you too. She thinks you're special, Josh. I really like her. She's amazing. She is. She's trusting, loyal. I took a sip of coffee. She hates liars. His smile faltered slightly. Who doesn't? Drop it, Agent Thorne. The transformation was instantaneous. The boyish charm vanished. His posture shifted, his eyes went cold and assessing. He didn't panic. He just sat back, crossing his arms. I assumed Versiani would run a check eventually, he said, his voice deeper, devoid of the aw-shucks accent. I expected it sooner, actually. Anthony wanted to kill you last night, I said conversationally. I stopped him. Am I supposed to thank you? You're supposed to explain why you're using my little sister to investigate a case you can't make. Who says I can't make it? If you had anything real, you would have arrested Anthony already. Instead, you're dating a college student hoping she'll invite you to dinner so you can plant bugs in the penthouse. I leaned forward. It's pathetic. He flushed slightly. Versiani is a criminal. He's a cancer on this city. He's a businessman who keeps order. And right now, he's the only thing standing between New York and chaos. You've drunk the Kool-Aid, Lauren. Sad. You seemed smart. I am smart. Smart enough to know that the FBI doesn't waste resources on a deep-cover operation for a simple RICO case. You're desperate. Why? He studied me, weighing his options. Then he sighed. Because it's not just RICO. There's a new player. Yamaguchi. The Yakuza. They're moving aggressively into the East Coast ports. They're ruthless. Trafficking, heavy weapons, stuff Versiani generally doesn't touch. They want Red Hook. Anthony controls Red Hook. Exactly. And Yamaguchi is planning to take it by force. A war is coming, Lauren. A big one. And when it starts, civilians die. We want to take Versiani off the board before the shooting starts. Vacuum up his organization. Let the dust settle. You want to arrest Anthony so the Yakuza can take over? We want to arrest Anthony so we can focus on Yamaguchi without a three-way war. I sat back, my mind racing. This was the leverage I needed. You're going about this wrong, I said. Enlighten me. You can't stop Yamaguchi by arresting Anthony. If Anthony goes down, his territory fragments. His capos fight for control. It creates a power vacuum that the Yakuza will walk right into. You'll hand them the city on a platter. He frowned. He knew I was right. What do you propose? He asked cautiously. A truce. He laughed. The FBI doesn't make truces with mob bosses. You make deals with informants all the time. Anthony stays in power. He holds the line against Yamaguchi. He keeps the drugs and the trafficking out of Red Hook, just like he always has. And what do we get? You get Yamaguchi. We feed you intel, routes, shipments, names. Anthony knows their movements better than you do. He can serve them up to you. And Megan? He asked quietly. Something in the way he said her name told me he hadn't been using her as casually as I'd assumed. Whatever else he was, Joshua Thorne wasn't eager to see a civilian bleed for his case. Megan is out. You break up with her. Today. You tell her. I don't care what you tell her. You broke her heart. You moved back to Ohio, whatever. But you leave her alone. If you ever come near her again, Anthony won't ask my permission to handle it. And neither will I. He looked at me, seeing the steel in my eyes. You're good at this. I learned from the best. I can't authorize this deal. I need to talk to my SAC. Make the call. I'll wait. He stepped outside. I waited, sipping my cooling coffee. Anthony's voice crackled in my earbud. You're incredible, he murmured. Dangerous, but incredible. I told you, I whispered. I'm handling it. 5 minutes later, Thorne came back. My boss is interested, but he wants a show of good faith. Intel on the next Yakuza shipment. Done, I said, knowing Anthony would agree. But I want immunity. For me, for Megan, for my father. In writing. If the intel is good, we can discuss it. Discuss it now, or no deal. He gritted his teeth. Fine. Immunity for the civilians. But Versiani is still fair game if he steps out of line. Anthony knows the rules. We shook hands. It felt like making a deal with the devil, but I wasn't sure which one of us was the devil anymore. One more thing, Thorne said, standing up. Tell Megan. Tell her I'm sorry. I did like her. That makes it worse, I said coldly. Goodbye, Agent. I walked out of the Starbucks, my legs shaking slightly. Marcus opened the car door for me. Well? Anthony asked as I slid in. He was looking at me with a mixture of pride and apprehension. It's done. We have a temporary alliance with the FBI against the Yakuza. And Megan is safe. He pulled me into a kiss, hard and possessive. You negotiated a federal immunity deal over a latte. I'm a multitasker. The fallout with Megan was the hardest part. She came home that evening in tears. Josh had texted her, a breakup text. I'm not ready for this. I'm moving back home. Coward. I held her while she cried on the sofa, stroking her hair, feeling like a monster. I had orchestrated this heartbreak, but looking at her, safe, free from a federal investigation, alive, I knew I would do it again. He was a jerk, I soothed. You deserve better. I really liked him, she sobbed. I know. But you're going to be an architect. You're going to build skyscrapers. You don't need a guy who breaks up via text. Anthony watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. Later, in bed, he held me. You did the right thing, he said. It feels terrible. That's how you know you're still human. The day it stops feeling terrible, that's when you worry. The next week was a flurry of activity. Anthony and his team worked to verify the Yakuza intel. The Japanese syndicate was planning a massive shipment of weapons into Pier 4 on Friday night. It was bold, aggressive. We fed the information to Thorne through a burner phone. The FBI set up a sting. Anthony's men would stay back, letting the feds take the heat, but ensuring the Yakuza were cornered. But on Thursday night, things went wrong. I was at the office late, reviewing the quarterly reports. Anthony called. It's a trap, he said, his voice tight. What? The shipment? The Yakuza know about the leak. They're not hitting Pier 4. They fed us bad intel to draw the FBI away. Where are they hitting? Pier 9. My pier. The main distribution hub for the legitimate imports. They're going to burn it down. Tonight. But the FBI is setting up at Pier 4. Exactly. We're on our own. I'm calling Thorne. No time. He won't believe us until it's too late. I have to go down there. I have to hold the line. Anthony. No. It's suicide. It's my territory, Lauren. If I lose Pier 9, I lose the business. I lose everything. I'm coming. No. You stay safe. We're partners, remember? Director of Compliance. That's my inventory they're threatening to burn. Lauren, pick me up. Or I take a cab. He swore in Italian. 5 minutes. When I got in the car, he handed me a vest. Put it on. We raced toward Red Hook. The skyline of Manhattan glittered across the water, indifferent to the war about to start on its edge. What's the plan? I asked, strapping the Velcro tight. We hold them off until the FBI realizes they've been duped and doubles back. My men are digging in at the warehouse. And the Yakuza? They're coming in by boat. Fast attack craft. They want to hit hard, plant incendiaries, and leave. We arrived at the pier. It was a fortress of shipping containers and cranes. Anthony's men were positioned on the catwalks and behind crates. The air smelled of salt and diesel. Stay in the command trailer, Anthony ordered. Monitor the cameras. Direct the squads. Do not come out. Anthony, he kissed me, a desperate, searing press of lips. I love you. Now go. I ran to the armored trailer that served as the site office. Inside, screens showed every angle of the pier. I put on the headset. This is Director Versiani, I said into the mic, my voice steady. Sound off. Squad Alpha, ready? Squad Beta, in position. Sniper team, green. I watched the screens. The water was dark, choppy. Movement, I called out. Sector 4, water approach, 3 boats, fast. Copy. Anthony's voice came over the comms. Hold fire until they breach the perimeter. The boats roared in, engines screaming. They didn't slow down. They rammed the dock. Men in black tactical gear poured out, firing automatic weapons. Contact, Anthony yelled. Engage. The night exploded. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark like strobe lights. I watched on the monitors, my heart in my throat, calling out positions. Flank left. They're moving to the fuel tanks. Squad Beta, intercept. It was chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Anthony was in the thick of it, moving with a lethal grace I had only seen in movies. He wasn't hiding. He was leading. Then I saw it on camera 3. A second wave. Not from the water. From the land side. Trucks smashing through the main gate. Rear breach, I screamed. Anthony, behind you. Trucks. Focus fire on the gate, Anthony ordered. But it was too many. The Yakuza had us pinned. I looked at the manifest on the desk. The containers near the gate. They were labeled as medical supplies, but I knew that shipment. It was ethanol. High-grade industrial ethanol for solvent production. Highly flammable. If the Yakuza breached those containers, the explosion would level the block. Anthony, I yelled. The containers at the gate. It's the ethanol shipment. You have to keep them away. We can't hold them. They're pushing too hard. I grabbed the burner phone. I dialed Thorn. "Thorn!" I screamed as soon as he answered. "Pier 9! It's Pier 9! We're overrun! They're going to blow the ethanol tanks! We're 10 minutes out! We realized the decoy!" "We don't have 10 minutes." I looked at the screens. The Yakuza were setting charges on the ethanol containers. Anthony was pinned down behind a forklift, taking heavy fire. I couldn't just watch. I grabbed the flare gun from the emergency kit on the wall. I kicked the door of the trailer open. The noise was deafening. Bullets whizzed past. I climbed the ladder to the roof of the trailer. I had a clear line of sight to the gate. The Yakuza were clustered around the containers. "Hey!" I screamed, though they couldn't hear me. I aimed the flare gun, not at the men, at the puddle of leaking ethanol spreading from a bullet hole in the container. If I lit it now, it would cause a controlled burn. A wall of fire that would separate the Yakuza from the main tanks. Risky. Insane. I pulled the trigger. The red flare arched through the night. It hit the puddle. Whoosh! A wall of blue and orange flame erupted, cutting across the entrance. The Yakuza scrambled back, screaming. The heat was intense even from 50 yards away. "Lauren!" Anthony shouted, seeing me on the roof. "Get down!" But the fire had done its job. It forced the Yakuza back, funneling them into a kill box. Anthony's men opened up, driving them away from the volatile tanks. Sirens wailed in the distance. The cavalry. "FBI!" Thorn's voice boomed over a loudspeaker as armored trucks smashed through the burning perimeter. "Drop your weapons!" The Yakuza, trapped between the fire, the Italians, and the feds, threw down their guns. I slumped onto the roof of the trailer, watching the flashing lights. My hands were black with soot. My dress was ruined. Anthony appeared at the bottom of the ladder. He climbed up, pulling me into his arms. He was shaking. "You crazy, brilliant woman," he gasped, kissing my soot-stained face. "You lit the pier on fire. Controlled burn," I coughed. "Basic chemistry." He laughed, a sound of pure relief, and buried his face in my neck. Below us, the FBI was cuffing the remnants of the Yakuza invasion force. Thorn looked up, saw us, and gave a curt nod. A truce honored. We had won, but as I looked at the burning gate, I knew this was just the beginning. We had survived the battle. Now we had to survive the peace. 2 weeks after the battle at Pier 9, the dust had settled, but the air in New York still felt charged. The alliance with Thorn and the FBI had held. Barely. They had their Yakuza arrests, the headlines screaming about a massive federal crackdown on international organized crime. Anthony's name was conspicuously absent from the press releases, a ghost in the machine. But victory had come with a cost. 7 of Anthony's men were dead. The funeral mass at St. Teresa's in Brooklyn was a solemn, rain-soaked affair. I stood beside Anthony in the front pew, my hand gripping his. He wore a black suit, his face a mask of stoic grief. Around us, the pews were filled with men in dark coats and women in veils, a sea of mourning. I saw the widows, young women with toddlers clinging to their legs, older matriarchs with rosary beads woven through their fingers. This was the part of the life no one talked about in the movies. The silence after the gunfire, the empty chairs at Sunday dinner. When the service ended, we stood by the church doors as the caskets were carried out. Anthony shook every hand, offered condolences in Italian to every grieving mother. He didn't flinch, didn't hurry. He bore the weight of their loss because it was his burden to carry. He was a good boy. A weeping mother told him, clutching his lapels. "He loved you, Anthony." "I loved him too, Mrs. Rossi," Anthony said softly. "He will not be forgotten. And you will never want for anything. You have my word." When the last car pulled away, Anthony leaned against the stone archway of the church, closing his eyes for a brief moment. He looked exhausted, older than his 34 years. "Are you okay?" I asked, touching his arm. He opened his eyes, the mask slipping just for me. "I put them there, Lauren. Every single one of them. They chose this life. Anthony, they chose you. They knew the risks. Does that make it easier? No. It just makes it true." He looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing something new. You've changed. Have I? You're not the girl who threw coffee anymore. You're harder, stronger. I had to be, I said simply. To be with you. He straightened up, adjusting his cuffs. Come. There's somewhere I want to go. We drove in silence. Not back to the penthouse, but deeper into Brooklyn. To a quiet, tree-lined street of brownstones. We stopped in front of a small, unassuming park overlooking the river. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Manhattan skyline in jagged strokes of orange and purple. My mother used to bring me here, Anthony said, staring at the water. Before she got sick, we'd sit on that bench and eat ices. He turned to me, taking both my hands. The wind whipped my hair around my face. I don't have a ring, he said. I gave you my grandmother's, but that was adrenaline. That was fear speaking. Anthony, let me finish. That night at the safe house, I asked you to marry me because I was afraid of losing you. Because I needed to bind you to me before you realized what a monster I was. My heart stuttered. Are you taking it back? No. He shook his head fiercely. I'm asking again. Not out of fear, but out of certainty. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain velvet box. Inside was not the vintage emerald, but a simple, elegant platinum band paved with diamonds. The emerald is for the Don's wife, he said. This is for Lauren, for the woman who saved my life, who saved my soul. He didn't kneel. He stood tall, meeting my eyes as an equal. Marry me, Lauren, not for the protection, not for the money, but because you love me, because you know exactly who I am, the good and the bad, and you still want to wake up next to me. I looked at him. I saw the blood on his hands, the weight on his shoulders, but I also saw the man who cooked risotto, who helped my sister with her homework, who saved my father without asking for a thank you. I know who you are, I whispered, and I choose you, every day. He slid the band onto my finger, stacking it with the emerald. Then let's do it. Now. Now! I laughed, a wet, choked sound. Like elope? No, not an elopement. A wedding. A real one. Small, private, but real. When? Next week. The next 7 days were a blur of logistics and secrecy. We couldn't have a big wedding. The security risks were too high, and the recent violence was too fresh. But Anthony promised me it would be perfect. We chose the small chapel on the grounds of his estate in Tuscany. It was neutral ground, safe, and away from the prying eyes of New York and the FBI. We flew out on the private jet. Dad, Megan, Anthony, and me. Marcus and a select team of guards came too, but they stayed in the background. The estate was breathtaking. Rolling hills of vineyards, cypress trees standing like sentinels, a villa that glowed golden in the Italian sun. On the day of the wedding, I got ready in a room overlooking the olive groves. Megan helped me with my dress, a simple, sleek white silk gown that flowed like water. No veil. I wanted to see everything clearly. You look amazing, Megan said, adjusting the straps. Like a movie star. I feel like I'm dreaming, I admitted. Dad walked in, looking handsome and healthy in his tuxedo. He teared up when he saw me. You look just like your mother, he choked out. Dad, I hugged him. Are you okay with this? Really? He held me at arm's length. He saved my life, Lauren. But more importantly, I've seen the way he looks at you. Like you're the only light in a dark room. That's all a father can ask for. The ceremony was at sunset. The chapel was filled with candles. There were no guests, just our tiny circle. A local priest Anthony had known since childhood officiated. I walked down the aisle to the sound of a string quartet. Anthony stood at the altar, looking devastating in his tuxedo. When our eyes met, the rest of the world fell away. We exchanged vows in Italian and English. Io prometto di esserti fedele sempre, Anthony said, his voice rough with emotion. I promise to be faithful to you always. Nella gioia e nel dolore, I replied. In joy and in sorrow. When he kissed me, it wasn't the desperate kiss of the safe house, or the possessive kiss of the warehouse. It was a promise kept, a seal on a contract written in blood and love. I present to you, the priest announced, Mr. and Mrs. Verciani. We walked out of the chapel into the twilight air, hand in hand. The reception was a dinner on the terrace under the stars. Just us, drinking wine from the estate's own vineyards, eating food made by the villa's cook. It was intimate, quiet, and perfect. Dad and Anthony sat together, smoking cigars and talking about baseball. Megan was teaching Marcus how to take a selfie, which was hilarious. I stood by the stone railing, looking out over the valley. Anthony came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Happy?" he murmured into my hair. Deliriously. "Good, because the honeymoon starts tomorrow." I thought this was the honeymoon. No, this is the wedding. The honeymoon involves 0 family, 0 bodyguards within 50 feet, and you and me on a boat off the Amalfi coast. Sounds dangerous. The best things always are. We stayed in Italy for 2 weeks. It was a bubble of bliss. No guns, no threats, just us. I learned that Anthony snored when he was deeply asleep. He learned that I was terrible at navigating maps, but excellent at finding the best gelato. But reality had to return eventually. We flew back to New York on a rainy Tuesday. As the skyline came into view, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. The peace was over. The work began again, but this time I wasn't afraid. We went straight to the penthouse. It felt like coming home. The next morning, I went into the Versiani Pharmaceuticals office. My nameplate was on the door. Lauren Versiani, Director of Compliance. I had a meeting with the legal team about the new import regulations. I walked in, set my coffee down, and took my seat at the head of the table. "Good morning," I said. "Let's get to work." At lunchtime, Anthony called. "How's the first day back, Director?" "Busy, productive. How's the underworld?" "Quiet, surprisingly quiet. The Yakuza have pulled back to the West Coast. The FBI is happy with their arrests. It seems peaceful. Don't jinx it." "I wouldn't dare. Dinner tonight? I'm making carbonara. I'll be there." I hung up, smiling. Life was good. Complicated, dangerous, morally gray, but good. 6 months passed in a blur of work and marriage. We built a life that straddled the line between the light and the dark. We were careful. We were smart. One evening in November, I came home early. I felt off, tired, nauseous. I stopped at a pharmacy, not mine, one across town, and bought a test. I took it in the master bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub, waiting for the longest 3 minutes of my life. Positive. 2 pink lines. I stared at them, my hand trembling. A baby. A baby in this world. A baby with a father who had a target on his back. A baby who would need protection from the moment it took its first breath. Fear washed over me, cold and sharp. But then I thought of Anthony. I thought of how he protected Megan, how he saved my father, how he built a fortress around the people he loved. He would be a terrifying father, and a wonderful one. I heard the elevator chime. Anthony was home. I walked out into the living room, holding the test behind my back. "Lauren," he called out, "I'm home. I brought cannoli." He walked into the room, loosening his tie. He saw my face and stopped instantly. The box of pastries hit the floor. "What is it?" he demanded, crossing the room in 2 strides. "What's wrong? Is it your dad? Is it a threat?" "No," I said, my voice shaking. "No threat." I brought my hand out from behind my back and held up the stick. He stopped, staring at it. He blinked, once, twice. Then he looked at my face, his eyes wide with shock and wonder. "Lauren?" he whispered. "We're going to need a better car seat," I said, tears spilling over. "Something bulletproof." He let out a shout of pure joy and scooped me up, spinning me around. He buried his face in my stomach, falling to his knees. "A baby," he murmured against me. "My baby. Our baby." He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "I will burn the world down to keep you both safe. You know that, right?" "I know," I said, stroking his hair. "But let's hope we don't have to." He stood up and kissed me, a kiss full of promise and fierce protective love. We stood there in the center of our fortress, high above the city, ready for whatever came next. The war was never truly over, but we had something worth fighting for, and that made all the difference. The next 7 months were the quietest of my life, which is to say, we only had 3 major security scares and 1 minor corporate espionage incident. In the world of Versiani Holdings, that was practically a vacation. My pregnancy was progressing perfectly. I was showing now, a distinct bump that Anthony was obsessed with. He would come home from meetings where he'd likely ordered hits or negotiated million-dollar deals, drop to his knees in the foyer, and press his ear to my stomach, whispering in Italian to his unborn child. Piccolina, he'd murmur. Sono io. Papa. Little one, it's me, Daddy. She can't hear you yet, I'd laugh, running my fingers through his hair. She knows my voice, he'd insist. She knows she's safe. We had decided on a name, Sophia, after his mother. But even as we prepared for Sophia's arrival, the world outside our penthouse fortress was shifting. The truce with the FBI was fraying. Thorne had been promoted, and his replacement was less pragmatic, more hungry for headlines. And though the Yakuza had retreated, the 'Ndrangheta, the Calabrian mafia, was sniffing around the edges of our territory, sensing weakness in our transition to legitimacy. It all came to a head on a humid Tuesday in late June. I was in my office at Versiani Pharmaceuticals, reviewing a shipment manifest from Italy. It was supposed to be raw chemical compounds for our new line of antibiotics. But the weights were off. Just slightly. Enough that a standard audit might miss it, but I didn't. I highlighted the discrepancy and called the warehouse manager. Hold the shipment from Napoli. I'm coming down to inspect it personally. Mrs. Versiani, you're 8 months pregnant, the manager protested. Mr. Versiani will kill me if I let you walk around the docks. He wasn't wrong to worry, but audits were how we kept this new version of the business from rotting in the dark corners. This was supposed to be paperwork, not war, and I clung to that lie like armor. Mr. Versiani isn't the director of compliance. I am. Have the crate ready. I called Marcus, who was now permanently assigned to me. We're going to Red Hook. Does the boss know? He's in a meeting with the 'Ndrangheta representatives. I'm not interrupting him for a clerical error. Let's go. When we arrived at the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of rain and diesel. I waddled. There was no other word for it. Toward the designated crate, Marcus flanking me like a shadow. Open it, I ordered the workers. They pried the lid off. Inside were drums of chemicals, labeled correctly. But when I checked the seals, they looked tampered with. Open a drum, I said. Ma'am, these are hazardous materials. I'm a pharmacist. I know how to handle reagents. Open it. They cracked the seal. I dipped a pipette in and ran a quick field test with the kit I carried. It wasn't antibiotic precursor. It was liquid cocaine. Pure, high grade, dissolved in solvent to bypass customs. Millions of dollars worth. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a smuggling operation using my company, our legitimate company, as a mule. Seal it, I said calmly, though my hands were shaking. Marcus, secure the area. No one leaves. Lauren? I turned. Standing in the warehouse doorway was a man I didn't recognize. He was dressed in a sharp suit, flanked by 4 men. Who are you? I demanded. I'm the owner of that shipment, he said, smiling thinly. And you must be the compliance director who asks too many questions. It was the 'Ndrangheta. They hadn't just been sniffing around. They had infiltrated our supply chain. While Anthony was negotiating with them in Manhattan, they were moving product through his own warehouse in Brooklyn. This is Versiani territory, I said, stepping in front of the crate. Get out. Or what? You'll throw a beaker at me? He laughed. Anthony is busy. By the time he realizes we're here, this shipment will be gone, and so will you. He signaled his men. They drew weapons. Marcus stepped in front of me, gun drawn. Back off. You're outnumbered, amico, the Calabrian said. Put the gun down. We just want the drugs. The girl can go. No deal, Marcus growled. I looked around. We were trapped. The warehouse workers had fled. It was just Marcus and me against 5 armed men. My hand went to my belly. Sophia. I wasn't going to die here. Not today. Wait, I shouted. Let's talk business. The Calabrian paused. Business? You want the drugs. I want my company clean. If you take this shipment, you leave a paper trail that leads straight back to me. The FDA shuts us down. The FBI investigates. You lose your route. I lose my company. So I can fix the paperwork. I lied smoothly. I can reclassify this as a hazardous waste disposal. It gets shipped out to a facility in Jersey. You intercept it there. No questions asked. Versiani Pharmaceuticals stays clean. You get your product. He narrowed his eyes. Why would you help us? Because I'm pregnant, I said, resting my hand on my bump. And I don't want a shootout in a chemical warehouse. I'm pragmatic. He studied me. Anthony said his wife was smart. He didn't say she was a traitor. I'm not a traitor. I'm a mother. There's a difference. He lowered his gun slightly. How long to fix the paperwork? 10 minutes. In the office upstairs. Fine. You go up. My men come with you. One wrong move, and the baby doesn't make it. I nodded, my face a mask of calm terror. I walked toward the stairs, 2 gunmen behind me. Marcus looked at me, frantic. I caught his eye and tapped my chest twice. Heart. It was a signal we'd worked out months ago. Panic button. I had pressed it the moment I saw the guns. Anthony was coming. I just needed to buy time. We went up to the glass-walled office overlooking the warehouse floor. I sat at the computer, typing slowly. The gunmen watched me like hawks. Hurry up, one growled. The system is slow, I stalled. Below, the Calabrian was pacing by the crate. Suddenly, the lights in the warehouse cut out. Pitch black. What the hell? The gunman yelled. Crash. The skylights shattered. Figures rappelled down from the roof in the darkness. Ropes. Tactical gear. Anthony. Gunfire erupted below. The gunman in the office spun around, distracted. Marcus, who had followed us up the stairs, tackled one. I grabbed the heavy stapler from the desk and swung it with both hands at the second man's head. He went down with a grunt. I scrambled under the desk, covering my head as chaos unleashed outside. It sounded like a war zone. Then, silence. Lauren! It was Anthony's voice, raw, terrified. I'm here. I crawled out from under the desk. He burst into the office, gun in hand, wild-eyed. He saw me, saw the unconscious gunmen, and dropped his weapon to pull me into a crushing hug. Are you hurt? Is Sophia okay? We're fine. We're fine. I was shaking now, the adrenaline crashing. The Ndrangheta, they were using our shipments. I know. He growled into my hair. I realized it during the meeting. Their numbers didn't add up. I left immediately. He pulled back, cupping my face. You stalled them. You negotiated. I lied to them. I told them I'd fix the paperwork. You're brilliant. You're absolutely brilliant. He kissed me hard, then turned to Marcus, who was nursing a bloody lip. Get this trash out of here, and burn that crate. I want nothing left. We walked out of the warehouse into the rain. The Calabrian leader was on his knees in the parking lot, surrounded by Anthony's men. Anthony, he pleaded. It was just business. Anthony looked at him, then at me. He placed a hand on my swollen stomach. You threatened my wife, Anthony said softly. You threatened my child. That's not business. That's suicide. He didn't kill him there. He didn't have to. He nodded to his men, and they dragged the Calabrian away. His fate was sealed, but Anthony wouldn't let me see it. Not today. We drove home in silence, his hand never leaving my belly. I'm sorry, he whispered eventually. I promised you safety. You gave me safety, I said. You came for me. It's not enough. It will never be enough. It has to be, I said firmly. Because this is our life, Anthony. We fight for it. Every day. 1 month later. The labor started at 3 a.m. It was fast, intense. We went to the private wing of Mount Sinai, Anthony pacing the room like a caged tiger, terrifying the nurses. When Sophia arrived, screaming and pink and perfect, Anthony wept. He held her like she was made of glass, counting her fingers, kissing her tiny forehead. She's beautiful, he choked out. She looks like you. She has your eyes, I whispered, exhausted but euphoric. We took her home to the penthouse 2 days later, Dad and Megan were waiting. The fortress was filled with flowers. Life settled into a new normal. Megan sent photos from campus and the occasional text about a new class or a bad date, proof that she was still building a life that had nothing to do with wiretaps and warrants. Once, she mentioned seeing Josh on the news outside a courthouse. She'd changed the subject before I had to say anything, and I'd been grateful for that small mercy. Diapers, feedings, board meetings with a baby monitor on the table. Anthony running an empire with spit up on his tailored suit. 5 months later. We were hosting a dinner party, a legitimate one. Investors, doctors, politicians. The clean face of Versiani Holdings. I stood on the balcony, holding Sophia, pointing out the lights of the city. She gurgled, reaching for the moon with a chubby hand. "Explain it to her," Anthony said, coming up behind us. "Explain what?" "The world." I looked at the city. The beautiful, dangerous, chaotic city. "Well, Sophia," I said softly, "it's a big place. There are bad people in it. Monsters, even." Anthony wrapped his arms around both of us, resting his chin on my shoulder. "But you don't have to be afraid," I continued, "because your daddy owns the monsters, and your mommy—" I smiled at Anthony. "Your mommy knows how to handle them." He laughed, kissing my cheek. "That she does." We stood there, the three of us, a family forged in fire and coffee spills. We weren't normal. We weren't safe. Not really. But we were together. And looking at the man I loved and the daughter we made, I knew one thing for sure. It was more than enough. The end.